Hi, everybody. I'm going to give a little bit of time for everyone to trickle in, but welcome. We're super excited to have you here. In the meantime, I want to know where everyone's calling in from. So I'm in New York City. If you could look out my window, you could tell by my classic New York view of a dark brick wall. But I know we have some other Kilo Code members calling in from Europe. So drop where you're calling in from, and we'll start in just a minute or two. All right, I see we got some more NYC folks. That's great to hear. First big question is the plant real or fake? It's real. And I've killed a lot of plants, so I'm actually very proud of this. Thank you for noticing. All right, just going to give a little bit, a couple more seconds for people to trickle in, and then we'll get started. I'm watching the chat, and it's great to see everybody chiming in. Super excited for this. Plants are hard to keep alive. I agree. All right, well, I think we can get started. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, so welcome in, everybody. I'm Brian. I'm a developer relations engineer here at KiloCode. And today we're going to dive into one of the most exciting and anticipated model releases of the year, Google's Gemini 3. So Google Gemini 3 is here, and this release is huge, right? Not just because of the hype or the marketing, because there's plenty of that, but also because of the capabilities and performance that it's bringing to the table, and because of the positive reactions that we're already seeing in the community, and because of how it might improve our AI coding workflow, especially inside of KiloCode. So if you've been watching, the model landscape over the past 6 weeks evolve like we have, it's been truly wild. And since September 29th, we got Claude 4.5 dropping. On October 27th, we had Minimax M2. On November 12th, we had OpenAI GPT 5.1 family just dropped last week. And then yesterday, November 18th, we had the lauded Gemini 3 release. So it sort of feels like we're getting like major updates or frontier updates almost weekly at this point. And now Google has stepped in with a model that appears to be a really significant improvement on the previous Gemini models. So today we're going to break down why and how. So for the agenda, we're going to talk about what Gemini 3 is, how it's different from previous releases by Google. We'll look at some benchmarks and talk about what we found when we put it head to head against other frontier models. We'll talk about what the community is saying about Gemini 3, and I'll show a quick demo. And then we'll leave plenty of time for the Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, feel free to start dropping them in the chat now, and we're going to get to as many as we can by the end of the session. And as promised, we'll pick 10 people that stayed for the session to give $100 of LLM usage credits redeemable through the Kilo Code gateway. All right. So what is Gemini 3 actually? Well, according to Google's DeepMind team, Gemini 3 is their most intelligent model to date. It's explicitly positioned as the next step in the Gemini era, which started almost 2 years ago. And it combines everything they learned from Gemini 1, 2, and 2.5 into a single family of models. So technically, it's a state-of-the-art reasoning model that has a 1 million token context window and up to 65,500 tokens of output. And as we'll discuss later, it's basically just crushed almost every benchmark for performance. But what actually makes it different from Gemini 1, 2, and 2.5? Well, Gemini 3 really isn't just Gemini 2.5, but bigger. And Google was very explicit about how these different generations stack up against each other. So with Gemini 1, they introduced native multimodality and long context. With Gemini 2, they laid the foundations for agentic capabilities and stronger reasoning. And then with Gemini 2.5 Pro, they pushed that even further and they sat at the top of the LM Arena leaderboard for over 6 months, which is a benchmark leaderboard that measures how different AI models stack up against each other with different tasks. And so Gemini 3 is been described as the model that combines all of those capabilities together. So you can, quote, bring any idea to life. In the benchmarks that Google published, it beats 2.5 Pro on essentially every major AI benchmark that they highlight. It hit PhD level scores on reasoning evaluations like Humanities Last Exam and GPQA Diamond. It reached a new state of the art status on Math Arena Apex for math. And behaviorally, Google mentioned something that I think developers really feel day to day, which is like the nature and style of the responses. So they say they designed the responses to feel smart, concise, and direct. They designed it to tell you what you need to hear and not just what you want to hear, which can be a flaw of a lot of AI models. And it's also better at understanding the intent behind your request and the nuances and things that you might have left out by accident or because you couldn't articulate them. So you don't have to keep over prompting it. And so, why should we as developers care about this? Well, Google calls Gemini 3 the best vibe coding and agentic coding model we've ever built. And that's not just my marketing language, that's directly from their launch. And they back it up with some specific coding centric benchmarks. So, Google Gemini 3 scored a 1487 ELO on Web Dev Arena, which is a human evaluated benchmark test focused on the model's ability to build rich, interactive web apps. For context, that score is the highest that's ever been achieved on that benchmark. It hit 54.2% on Terminal Bench 2.0, which is specifically about a model's ability to use tools via a terminal. Think like running commands, navigating a file system, or following instructions in a shell environment. That's also currently the highest score ever achieved. And it greatly outperformed Gemini 2.5 Pro on SWE Bench Verified with a published score of 76.2%. And SWE Bench is all about how coding agents can actually fix real bugs in real repositories. And in that category, it's trailing Claude Sonnet 4.5 by just 1%. And if you're wondering like what these numbers and comparisons look like um, in practice, so here's a comparison chart between Gemini 3 Pro, Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude Sonnet 4.5, and GPT 5.1 in the Terminal Bench 2.0 benchmark. And you can see that's not only leading these other models, but it's leading by like quite a significant margin. And then, there's the things that developers need or want to know about new models, which are the context. As I mentioned before, Gemini 3 Pro offers a 1.05 million token context window and up to 65,500 tokens of output. For pricing, Gemini 3 is less expensive than Claude Sonnet 4.5. At typical prompt sizes under 200,000 tokens, Gemini 3 comes in at $2 per million input versus Claude's 3 and $12 per million output tokens versus Claude's 15. And then when you get into the long context territory, which Gemini 3 can handle with its million token window, as can Claude, which also has a million, the pricing gap widens just a little bit with Gemini coming in at $4 per million input and 18 output, while Claude moves to $6 per million and 22.50, $6 for input and 22.5 per million tokens output. So, like to summarize that, basically, Gemini gives you this frontier level reasoning, huge context window, and coding ability at a relatively lower token cost, especially compared to the other leading models. But of course, the great thing about Kilo Code is that you can change the model you're using at any time. So, if this feels expensive to you, you can always use Gemini 3 for the reasoning intensive work or the design, and then you can switch to more cost-effective models for the other tasks or for minor implementations and things like that. And you can do that without having to have your workflow change in any significant way. So let's move on to what the community is saying about Gemini 3. So it's not just, my words. So these are some tweets, some replies to some tweets that we put out on X about Gemini 3. And from what we've seen, the reaction across the community has been, nearly unanimous. I think people are feeling like Gemini 3 is Google's first fully complete like frontier model that's giving, unexpectedly good responses. Um, so, some of the headlines are, this community member mentioned that they feel it's literally the next step in web development. Someone else said in response to one of the tests we ran, 72% on hard coding and UI tasks is impressive. Seems like Gemini is really bridging reasoning with practical execution. Someone else said that they were able to solve a complex deadlock issue in CSLE after just 1 hour of debugging with Gemini 3. And then my personal favorite tweet, shout out to Mike Boyson, said that this seems like a holy S word moment. And honestly, I'm inclined to agree because another great tweet that I saw, shout out to Sabo Sugi. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But this person said that they were able to build this 3D rendered walk around museum app where you can like walk around with the arrow keys and look at art in this 3D rendering all with one prompt. And frankly, that might have felt like a fantasy last year or even some months ago. So these are some really promising results. But I don't think that's the only reason why people are having such a positive reaction to this new model. I think it's also because AI engineering is noticeably shifting from just prompt and output to the more like robustly agentic version of goal, plan, execute, validate, and iterate. Right? The old way was like, write me some code or fix this minor bug. And the new way is, I want to describe the goal and then I want the AI to build the plan, structure the components, update the repo, and then verify that nothing broke, right? And that requires like true agentic orchestration. And I think Gemini 3 really plays well in that world because at Kilo, we've always maintained the philosophies of enabling open model choice. So you're never locked into any one model, and then multi-mode agentic orchestration, where you can begin to expect agents to delegate and perform different tasks. And that open agentic workflow isn't compromised when these new models emerge and benchmarks shift, but it actually benefits from that. And I think Gemini 3 fits right into that evolution. And another little tidbit is if you've ever attended a Kilo Code webinar before, then you might already know my colleague Brendan, who has a great analogy for AI coding agents, which is that right now we should probably be treating them like a junior developer, right? A developer that's really eager to contribute, never gets tired, but has an occasional issue of being very confidently wrong, which we all know AI can be. And I think as these new advanced reasoning models become available, we're going to start seeing a shift towards AI coding agents reasonably taking on more and more responsibility, especially with when combined with that true agentic orchestration workflow that I mentioned, to the point where it might not be that far. We might not be so far away from the point where we can trust agents to respond to the responsibilities of a senior or managing engineer. I'm not sure if we're there yet, but I think that models like this are a promising step in that direction. And we sort of validated that experience with some of our own tests. So we ran Gemini 3 against Claude 4.5 Sonnet and GPT 5.1 Codex across 5 uniquely different challenges. So the first one was we had it build a web app that visually explains how a transformer model processes a sentence. And then we had it build a browser-based micro operating system, a physics sandbox, a DAG workflow editor, and then a web-based simulation of a digital petri dish. And this is how they scored. Gemini 3 Pro outperformed in nearly every category, basically every category, with a total percentage score of 72%. So that's ranking each of these tasks out of 10 by human judges. Gemini 3 scored 72, Claude 4.5, 54, and GPT 5.1 Codex 18%. And I think that we found out that the difference, wasn't just the accuracy. It was maybe what you'd call taste, right? Like Gemini 3 picked libraries and architectures that a human would pick. It wrote code that a human could look at and extend. The designs felt adaptive and not template driven. And then when it generated multi-file React projects, the structure actually made sense to a human reviewer. And that's because while benchmarks are important, right, and everyone wants to know them when a new model comes out, they don't always perfectly define or describe how it feels to actually build with something, right? And to that end, I'm going to go ahead and show a quick demo so we can all hopefully get that exact feeling I'm talking about. But first, this is a quote from Google's CEO on the Gemini release. So he said, it's a state of the art model in reasoning built to grasp depth and nuance, whether it's perceiving the subtle clues in a creative idea or peeling apart the overlapping layers of a difficult problem. Gemini 3 is also much better at figuring out the context and intent behind your request, so you get what you need with less prompting. And so that idea to me sounds like the ideal of vibe engineering, right? The ideal experience is that the AI can infer accurately the details and nuances that we aren't able to or forget to articulate in our natural language prompt. And so, for the interest of time, because I want to make sure we get to the Q&A, and because as I'm sure as developers, many of you are aware, I'm quite familiar with the contentious nature of the live demo gods. So I went ahead and recorded a quick video of a singular prompt that I gave to Kilo Code using Gemini 3, and we just sped up through the parts that might take a little more time. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that right now. All right, I hope that's big enough to see. But I can describe what's going on as well. So what I did is I went to VS Code and I opened the Kilo Code extension. I made sure that I was on Gemini 3, which you can search from the model selection guide here. And I switched to orchestrator mode. So if you don't already know, Kilo Code has 5 built-in agent modes that are specialized for different types of tasks. So there's architect for project design, code, which is the default for implementation, ask for when you have questions that don't require you to change your code base, debugging for troubleshooting, and orchestrator, which breaks down the task and distributes responsibilities across all the modes. So I went to orchestrator and then I gave Kilo this prompt: create a modern, detailed 2D platform game called Kilo Man with a humanoid character that has to avoid obstacles and moving monsters to reach a final goal, like Super Mario. It should be full screen with a parallax aesthetic background and black and yellow theme. The game camera should follow the player. There should only be one fairly long scrolling level. And I also want to include a slider that adjusts how hard the character moves or how high the character jumps. So it first generates a subtask for architect to design the implementation. Then architect mode generates this architecture plan in a markdown file. It switches back to orchestrator when the plan is ready, and then generates a new subtask for code mode to implement the plan. And we're going to speed through all this development where we can see code mode has created a checklist to proceed with the implementation. And then once it's done, switches back to orchestrator mode to let us know that the project is finished. And I have not touched this project since this one prompt, but I do have it running in my local environment here. So I'm going to jump on over to that quickly. All right, so here we go. This is the one-shot Kilo Man app that we created. And honestly, it looks incredible. It's pretty much exactly what I wanted. I feel like a Twitch streamer right now, like playing this video game in front of all of you. So hype me up, chat. But yeah, it's playable. The design looks great. I died when I fell off this cliff. So, at first glance, as a developer, I'd be extremely satisfied with this result, right? Especially knowing that it was done in one prompt. There's no obvious design flaws, and it's basically like exactly what I was hoping to create. And I think that this speaks, to what I referenced earlier about Gemini 3 really excelling at inferring the nuances and details of what I wanted without me having to explicitly say. For example, I never explicitly told it that if I fall off a platform, the level should restart, right? But of course it should. And it knew to do that. And it knew to add all these other little details that I didn't mention, like the monsters patrolling back and forth and all of these background images and stuff like that. So But let's dive a little bit deeper into what Kilo and Gemini did to actually build this project here. So I'm going to jump over to VS Code. And there we go. So here's my my project in VS Code. We can see my one prompt from last night here. If we go back to the file explorer, we can see here's the architecture plan that the architect mode and Gemini 3 came up with. So let's dive a little bit into that to see how it actually implemented this project. So we can see we have the overview, the title. Okay, it's a 2D platformer game. The tech stack, Next.js 15, React, Tailwind, and then HTML5 canvas for the graphics. It gave us this theme that we mentioned with the pretty aesthetics and the depth and the gradients and the parallax motion. Comes up with the component structure. It has a system for the camera. And, all of these things are things that we didn't explicitly mention. It has this system to generate the monsters. It has these visuals that are generated with the HTML canvas, the different types of the project. And then here we have, the implementation plan, which code mode, followed to actually implement the working project here. So we have the, engine, the gameplay, the visuals, and then the physics. And I'm assuming that slider that I forgot to show, I'll show later, that changes how high the character can jump. So, yeah, these are all choices that I probably would have made for building this project myself from scratch in like a concise and extendable way. And now that we have this awesome project, I think it's a great opportunity to show off a new feature that's actually being rolled out for early testing today. So anyone's welcome to try and give feedback on, which is Kilo Deploy. So I'm going to hop back over. I'm going to stop sharing this and I'm going to hop back over to the Kilo dashboard here. And we can see that we have this new tab here called Deploy, right? And this is basically like a functionality where you can take any GitHub repo and deploy it to a shareable public production URL in just a couple clicks. As a prerequisite to use this, if anyone's curious, you have to first go to this other new tab called Integrations and connect GitHub. It's super easy. If I've already done it here, of course, for the demo, but there's just a button that says configure, sends you over to GitHub where you allow the Kilo Code app to connect your GitHub repository to Kilo, and that's it. And then you're integrated. And once that's ready, you can come over to deploy. And what you can do is you can click this new deployment button, find your GitHub integration repo. So we'll select the Kilo Man game, and we only have one branch. So if if we had different branches, we could specify that here. And then you just click create deployment, and it will start building a deployment of the Kilo Code game the Kilo Man game that we designed with these build logs. There's options to cancel, and then it'll give us this URL eventually that has the hosted game that we can share and use in production or whatever we want. So that's super exciting. I'm going to give this time a little bit of time to build. And during that time, we're going to hop over to the next segment, which is the Q&A. So I'm going to just stop sharing this for now. We'll return to that later. And we'll hop back over to slideshow. And I have some of my Kilo partners here who are have been fielding some questions, and I'm just going to pull up the chat here and go ahead and answer some. And feel free to keep asking questions. We'll do our best to get to as many as we can, and then there'll be ways to reach us afterwards in our Reddit or Discord as well. Okay. So one question is, what's Kilo Code's long-term plan for autonomous debugging? Will future agents detect regressions, refactor code, run tests, and create PRs using real-time analytics to form a self-improving multi-agent pipeline? So that's the question. And yeah, there's a couple things here. One, which I already briefly mentioned in the demo, is that we do have a native debug mode, which is a great as a great partner for debugging. It's basically a specialized version of the Kilo agent that can work on and excels at debugging. So you can use that mode with Gemini or with any model you want. But there's also a couple of new features coming down the pipeline. Like we have a code reviewer and cloud agents coming soon that are going to bring a lot more functionality and capabilities to that debugging workflow. And one of our Kilo members will paste the link for some of those features that are going to be rolling out for early testing soon in the chat. And then I'm just reading through some more questions. Any plans to put Gemini 3 Pro on a free tier for limited time? How did you guys manage to make Kilo code so fast? Well, I appreciate that. There's no plans to put it on a free tier right now. It is like a frontier model that is, one of the more robust and naturally a little bit more costly models. So that's not planned right now. How did you guys manage to make Kilo code so fast? Well, I'm glad you asked that because we have an internal moniker here called Kilo Speed. And basically, it just means that we ship things really fast and we all work at a really fast pace. And, we listen to our community. We try to implement what they want as soon as possible and we never slow down. So that's my honest answer. Appreciate you complimenting that and asking us. So yeah, searching through some more questions here. Is the presenter a real human? What if the video was generated with Gemini 3 Pro multimodal? That's a great question. I don't exactly know how I could verify that I'm a real human because the multimodal mode is really powerful. I guess whenever we host a Kilo Code event or whenever we're doing some community stuff, you're gonna have to come up and find me and chat to me about Kilo to prove that I'm a real guy. All right, another question is the Kilo Code CLI being actively deployed and is it core to the product or actively developed, excuse me, and is it core to the product? Yes and yes. So it's always being iterated on. We're adding new things all the time. We just added a couple new features like parallel agents, so you can have two Kilo Code CLI agents work on the same task at the same time without conflicting with each other. So that's an awesome functionality. We also added, support for autonomous mode so that it can, be implemented in, development pipelines where you don't need approval and all sorts of new flags and features. So it's always being developed. It's definitely core to the product. And I'd love to hear your feedback on if you've used it. And if you have, feel free to post in our Reddit or Discord about your experience. And we'd love to take a look. So another question is it better to access Gemini 3 through the Kilo Gateway or the CLI? How does it handle tool calling? So that really depends on your use case or in preference. I think that they're equally valid. It's a similar experience for either. You're getting the same model at the end of the day. It's just more about what your workflow, what you prefer in your workflow. So for example, I really like using the CLI. It's just what I'm used to. So yeah, no, it's available there. It's available in the extension through the Kilo Gateway. Um, and yeah, so it's really just whatever you prefer. Do parallel agents use work trees under the hood? Yes, they do. And if you have any other questions about the parallel agents, I know it's a newer feature, and so you all might be still testing it or working out, how you can implement it into your workflow. Please do, hop in our Reddit or our Discord, and there's a lot of people there talking about it, how to use it to its highest potential. So definitely love to hear your feedback on it. Okay. Is our fork for Kilo Code based on an old version of Klein, or is it still up to date with Klein? So we originally forked Rue and then updated Kilo Code to also have all the features from Klein. Plus, we've added things like more features like autocomplete, and then all the features I mentioned earlier that are coming down, in the future at kilo.i/next. That's the URL to see all the roadmap items that you can subscribe to for early testing. But our plan is to continue to be a superset of all the best open source features. Like that was our mentality when we built Kilo Code, and that's going to be it forever. We want to have the best and most robust version of an open source AI coding agent, and that means pulling in all the best features from all of the existing ones. So that's always going to be the plan. So Google rolled out a new IDE about called anti-gravity. Yes, I've heard of it. I haven't had a chance to test it too explicitly. Obviously, it came out yesterday, so I think I'm gonna spin that back on you all and ask like how you feel about it. What's your experience been? I've been really impressed by Gemini 3 personally, so I'm sure it's great, but I like to use Kilo Code, obviously. But I'm curious what you all think about it, and feel free to post in the chat and on our Reddit and Discord about that too, and we'd love to join the conversation with you. Someone said, looking forward for more online events. Any plans? Yeah, we have them all the time. So you should, like I said a million times now, join the Discord or follow us on social media. In fact, my colleague Brendan, who I mentioned earlier, and another colleague of mine, Alex, will be talking tomorrow about using Kilo with your team, and they're going to be focusing on answering all your questions. So if we didn't get to yours today, you should definitely come back and tune in for that tomorrow. They're both great. It'll be a great time. So yeah. All right, I know we're at 12:30 now, which is when this is supposed to end. So no pressure to stick around. I'm going to answer one more question, and then I'm going to show you that deployed version of the Kilo Man app we built. Um, and if you have to leave now, you're not disqualified from the random $100 usage lottery either. So don't worry about that. I know we're going over. So the last question is, are you frequently accepting community submissions for bug fixes and upgrades to Kilo, specifically the JetBrains plugin? Is there a best practice document my team could find to help develop this? So yeah, we're always accepting community submissions for bug fixes and feature updates. That's done through our GitHub discussions forum. So that forum is specifically and only for these types of features and requests and bug submissions. So one of our moderators will paste that in the chat, and we'll follow up with that in an email after as well. But yeah, feel free to put your requests and bug IDs in the GitHub discussions. All right, so I know we had a lot of questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to them all. You should tune into the webinar tomorrow for that. But I'm gonna hop back in now to Kilo Deploy, where I am going to show you our deployed game. All right. So as we can see, the deployment was successful. It deployed, our main branch on our repository to this unique URL. We have the build logs here. We could redeploy if we want, and then if we click over to the link. Oh, am I sharing? I gotta share the new tab. Excuse me. All right, there we go. So we have our game on a shareable production URL. And someone said, I have to finish the level. And I'm so glad you challenged me to do that, because I didn't think I have time to play it, but I've been, messing around with this like over the last night. And I'm been wanting to live out my fantasy of being a video game streamer. So here we go. This part is actually really tricky, a lot of pressure. I'm gonna give it one more try, and if I can't get it, then I'll share the link with you all, and you can try to win and then post in our Discord and Reddit when you do. All right, here we go. Oh, that was close. A lot of pressure now. It's the farthest I've gotten in a while. Oh, all right. I couldn't do it. Maybe you can do better. I'm going to share the link to this game later so you all can try it. But just to wrap up, the reason I'm personally so excited about this model and being able to use it in Kilo Code is that we just developed and shipped to production a fully functional, modern, and honestly pretty fun video game with one prompt and a few clicks in the Kilo dashboard. And now we have a live video game on a shareable URL. And a few years ago or a few months ago, when AI coding models and agents were not quite as powerful, this might have felt like a fantasy, frankly, or something that would take a lot of iterations to actually bring to fruition. And I think the areas where Gemini 3 really stands out, like advanced reasoning, long process implementation, and inferring those nuances and things from our prompt that we didn't explicitly say, align really well with KiloCode's agentic orchestration. Gemini 3 is really strong at planning robust architectures and implementations. And we saw that in the benchmarks. And I think that's why when we asked KiloCode to implement this end-to-end game in one go, it did a really impressive job and a shippable job right off the bat. So, all right, we covered a lot today. We covered the reasons why I'm excited about Gemini 3. We'd love to hear what you think about it. So please feel free to join the conversation on our official Reddit page. I'm about to share some QR codes where you can, tune into that. So I'm just going to share that quickly. And then also, if you do end up using deploy, which should be enabled in your account now, please do join this Discord channel, which is a channel specifically for feedback on Kilo deploy. And we're going to be, myself and the engineers are going to be reviewing this Discord really carefully and, implementing any, bug fixes or feature requests that we can to help improve the experience for you guys. So there's the Reddit QR. There's the Discord for the deploy feedback, and we'll be following up over email where you can access the recording. And we'll also be reaching out to those 10 lucky attendees to give out the bonus credits. So thanks again for joining, and I hope to see you all again very soon. Thanks.